Good evening, everybody. I know some of you I just met, some of you I've seen before at Anandagiri. So just to introduce myself, I've been at Anandagiri with Ajahn Achalo for 6 months now. 6 months in Thailand, actually 7 months in Thailand, 1 month at Wat Mapchan. Before that I was in California, Northern California, Abhayagiri Monastery. It's a monastery of Lumpha Pasano, a disciple of Ajahn Chah, Lumpha Cha, most of you know. I was there for 6 years, and before that I was a Mahayana monk in Korea. So Ajahn has been advertising about the Korean Heart Sutra. So that was a very common chant. We would do that every day. So I memorized that, and it's Chinese characters with the Korean pronunciation. So if you know the Chinese, it might sound familiar, but it's a little bit different. Anyway, so that'll be tomorrow. I'll do that. So I just thought to talk to you about a couple, well, actually one sutta and then maybe some stories about Mahamoggallana. So we went to Mahamoggallana's cave, was the first one on Vulture's Peak as we walked up there, then Sariputta's cave. The main sutta I'll talk about, I have to read from Access to Insight here because I know a little bit about this one, but don't memorize it. Maybe people know the Digha Nikaya. The Digha Nikaya is the long discourses of the Buddha. The sutta number 2 is called the Samaññaphala Sutta. That is the fruits of the contemplative life. The reason I chose to talk about the sutta is because it was spoken at Dr. Jivaka's mango grove. And people remember that? We passed by today. We didn't stop. It didn't look like a mango grove at all. I don't know what happened. Maybe, I'm guessing it was turned into a monastery, and so I didn't read about it, but there was all the brick kind of ruins, and it looked like it had been a monastery or a temple there. So Dr. Jivaka was the doctor of King Bimbisara. So, that's a very high position. He was a royal doctor. And then, unfortunate situation, Prince Ajatasattu had his father murdered. Yeah. Very sad story, but anyway, Dr. Jivaka became the doctor for the Prince Ajatasattu. And I think before that, he had faith in the Buddha. I think he became a stream enterer, but definitely he had a lot of faith. But he was in the inner circle of the king Ajatasattu after Ajatasattu had murdered his father and become king. And just in the introduction about this, there was a point that maybe some people have heard before, I didn't know this myself, is from the bad karma of Ajatasattu killing his father, actually he was killed by his own son. Yeah, I didn't realize that. So that's how he died, and after death he was reborn in a very, very low region in hell. But he had a lot of faith in the Buddha, and so Yomlek, our tour guide, said that at the time of the Buddha's passing away, he was one of the kings who took the Buddha's relics, it said, on top of his head, and took them back from, what would that have been, Kushinagara, where the Buddha passed away, back to Magadha, had them put in a stupa, and he was also the king who sponsored the first Buddhist council. So that was when all the arhats gathered together. I think it's called the Boar's Cave. It's a cave here in Rajgir. I've been to it before. I went there when I was a Korean monk, and it's a very small cave. But they say that thousands of arhats did a council there. Maybe they had to be outside. I'm not quite sure how it worked. But he was the king who sponsored that. So at that time, he said he was kind of the upatak, actually, for all the arhats. He provided all the food and did all these things, and the arhats were reciting the suttas, the Vinaya, I believe for 3 months, maybe for 6 months. It was a long, long time, and he was supporting that. So because of all the good karma that he also made, I believe it's said that after he comes out of his birth in hell, at a point in the future, he will become a Pacceka Buddha. Yeah, so that's very interesting. So anyway, the story in the Samaññaphala Sutta starts with King Ajatasattu, and he's sitting on the rooftop of his palace. So the palace that he would have been living in would be somewhere in Rajgir, I'm not exactly sure. And it was the Uposatha night and the end of the rainy season. It sounded like it was a beautiful night, the full moon. And he asks his ministers, he says, it's a beautiful night, a lovely night, a very auspicious night. what Brahmin or Samana, what priest or contemplative could I go to talk to make my mind peaceful? And when he says that, all of his different ministers recommend a different spiritual teacher. Many people know there were many spiritual teachers at the Buddha's time teaching all kinds of different things. You name it, they taught it, all sort of different beliefs. And all of them say, oh, you should go to this teacher, you should go to that teacher. And at the end, Dr. Jivaka was just sitting there silently, doesn't say anything. And the king asks him, what's up with you, Jivaka? What do you think? And he says, so he was a follower of the Buddha, but he didn't advertise it. He was very humble. And he says, well, there's a good reputation of the Blessed One. It's the words, Itipiso. The Blessed One is the Arhat, the perfectly enlightened one, etc. I believe that the king had never seen the Buddha before. So he said, oh, well, that sounds good. Let's go see the Buddha. So, very interesting how he approached the Buddha. I found this part of the story fascinating. Said the king had 500 female elephants prepared and had 500 of the court women each put on an elephant, and he took this huge gathering of all the important, big people from the palace, and he went to the mango grove. So imagine this huge royal procession. They come to the mango grove, and at a certain point he gets down from his elephant, and he says to Jivaka, friend Jivaka, you aren't deceiving me, are you? You aren't betraying me, are you? You aren't turning me over to my enemies, are you? So at a certain point he got really scared because he got to the mango grove. He couldn't yet see the monks, but it was totally silent. And there was supposed to be the Buddha and 1,250 arhats there. And there's no words at all that he can hear. There's no sneezing. There's no sound of coughing. And Dr. Jivaka said, do not be afraid, great king. Don't be afraid. I'm not deceiving you or betraying you or turning you over to your enemies. Go forward, great king. Go forward. And at that point, the king gained encouragement, and he goes into the assembly. And he sees the Buddha. The Buddha is teaching the Dhamma, and he goes and pays respects to the Buddha. And he decides to ask him a question. So at this point, he didn't know anything about the Buddha's Dhamma. It was probably his first introduction to it. And the question he asks is, I think, something that many people can relate to. He basically says, in society, we see all these different professions. He says, there are common craftsmen, elephant trainers, horse trainers, charioteers, archers, etc., laundrymen, weavers, basket makers, potters, calculators, and all sorts of different professions. They give pleasure and refreshment to themselves, to their parents, wives, and children, to their friends and colleagues. They put in place an excellent offering to Brahmins and contemplatives, leading to heaven, resulting in happiness, conducive to a heavenly rebirth. And then he says, is it possible, Lord, to point out a similar fruit of the contemplative life, meaning the monk's life, that's visible here and now? So he basically says that in society we see all kinds of people doing all sorts of work, and it leads to benefits for themselves. It leads to a good life. People support themselves and their children. But what are these monks doing? Going off into the forest, meditating, what's all this about? How does that benefit society? How does that benefit anybody? I think people that aren't spiritually inclined can understand or think this way. Actually, one of the people in my family, when I told him about the monks going on alms round and everything in Thailand, he didn't understand it at all. He said, why would you want to give to them? What good would that do? And so if people don't understand karma, don't understand generosity and things, you can think like this. So then the Buddha talks to him about what the benefits are of the contemplative life. And he talks about the training of a monk and how it starts in the beginning and goes step by step. So this teaching is called the gradual training. And there's a lot of different ways that the Buddha taught the Dhamma, but the idea of the gradual training is that there are causes and conditions that we have to develop, put into place. We can't go straight to the end of the path. There are prerequisites. Maybe we've practiced those in past lives, and surely we all have for all the people that are here. But we do need to do these things in a way, step by step. But in another way that he taught, seeing the Dhamma, seeing the ultimate truth, is a immediate, direct experience. The Buddha said that the Dhamma is akaliko, not dependent on time. So meaning the ultimate truth isn't something that's step by step. It's always present, but the causes and conditions of the path are something that are definitely step by step to be developed. So the Buddha talks about this gradual training. It's very interesting. So the first thing he says is that, suppose, great king, that you had a worker, somebody who was a servant, a worker in your palace, and he decided to become a monk. He gave up his possessions, he shaved off his hair, he put on the monk's robe, and he went forth from the house life into homelessness. You being the king, would you force him back to work in the palace? Would you make him continue to be your employee? And the king said, no, definitely not. He said, rather, I am the one who should bow down to him, rise up out of respect for him, invite him to a seat, invite him to accept gifts of robes, alms food, lodging, and medicinal requisites for the sick. And I would provide him with righteous safety, defense, and protection. And so the Buddha says, so what do you think, great king? With that being the case, is there a visible fruit of the contemplative life, or is there not? And the king agrees that there is. So the idea here is that anybody, if they decide to go forth, become a monastic, renunciant practitioner, that is something that's universally respected in all cultures. That there are people who have made a commitment to dedicate themselves to the spiritual life. And this is something that definitely in India at that time, and I think almost all cultures around the world, that's respected. People respect this, and rightfully so. So he starts step by step with that, and then he goes into the section on sila. So if you look at the gradual training in a succinct way, what's talked about is sila, samadhi, bhanya, training in virtue, training in meditation, peacefulness of mind, and the training in wisdom, sila, samadhi, bhanya. But in this discourse, it's really elaborated into many, many different things. So the section on virtue is what's called the 10 courses of good action, similar to the 5 precepts and the 8 precepts, but it has a little bit more detail. Buddha says, how is a monk consummate in virtue? Abandoning the taking of life, he abstains from taking of life. He dwells with his weapon laid down, his knife laid down, merciful, compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, he takes only what is given, lives not by stealth, but by means of a self that has become pure. Abandoning uncelibacy, he lives a celibate life. Abandoning false speech, he speaks truthfully. And then it goes on to divisive speech, abusive speech, idle chatter. And from there, it goes into aspects of his livelihood. So for a monk, the livelihood that the Buddha praised and actually required the monks to live is one where we're not engaging in any sort of commercial activities. There's a teacher many of you may know, Ajahn Jeff, and he has a nice essay called the Economy of Generosity. It's a nice term. So it means when you come into a monastery where the monks practice good vinaya, nobody is trying to sell you anything. Like so many people around here that we've been seeing all day, begging. You're not asking for anything, not trying to sell you anything. Everything is generosity. Meaning if you want to make a donation, if you want to make an offering, you can. People aren't bugging you about it. And on the other side, the teachings, the Dhamma, the opportunities to practice, these are freely offered by the monastery. So it's really a beautiful thing, and this was something that really impressed me when I first came to Abhayagiri. I had been at Korean monasteries, and sometimes you see this, it's very common in the Buddhist world, but they'll really be like, the donation box will be like right below the Buddha statue, you know? And then it's like, you know, you come here, okay, you do this puja, here you got to pay this money, okay, you want a prayer to Avalokiteshvara, okay, that's, 300 baht, whatever. It's this sort of thing. It's sort of commercial Buddhism. And there's a lot of that in the Buddhist world. When we made an offering of flowers at the Ganda Kuti, the Buddha's Kuti, just now on Vulture's Peak, there was a layman who was the attendant, and he said to the monks, "Tambun, tambun," meaning give money, give money. So even they're asking the monks. But what the Buddha wanted is that the monks should just live on what's freely given, the four requisites, food, robes, medicines, and dwellings that are freely offered, and that they would have the opportunity to teach Dhamma, to help the lay people, to give back as an expression of their own generosity. So, nobody forces us to teach. Monks teach if they wish to. Actually, I haven't had many opportunities to give Dhamma talks, and Ajahn Achala just asked me this afternoon. I wasn't prepared at all. So sometimes that happens too. But if Ajahn Achala asks me, I'll definitely accept. So the Buddha talks about all these different kinds of livelihoods that different monks and Brahmins did at the time of the Buddha. So like things like divination, like they take different things like bones from an animal or boiling water and they like tell the future, or they do astrology, or they do all these different things, and they do that to make a livelihood. And the Buddha said that bhikkhus shouldn't do that. Bhikkhus can know about those sort of things, but that shouldn't be how they make their livelihood. So that's part of the section on virtue. And what I would like to emphasize here that relates to the virtue for anybody, whether they're a monk or a layperson, is that for lay people practicing the 5 precepts, really the 5 precepts, as you know, are the main framework that also all the other precepts, the 8 precepts, the 10 precepts, the 227 precepts, they all fit into the main categories: not killing, not stealing, not lying, etc. And the benefit, and this is something that we can experience for ourselves and is very important in developing our meditation, the benefit of the virtue, the Buddha says like this: a monk who is thus consummate in virtue sees no danger anywhere from his restraint through virtue, just as a head-anointed, noble warrior king who has defeated his enemies sees no danger anywhere from his enemies. In the same way, the monk thus consummate in virtue sees no danger anywhere from his restraint through virtue. Endowed with this noble aggregate of virtue, he is inwardly sensitive to the pleasure of being blameless. This is how a monk is consummate in virtue. So he points out the pleasure of blamelessness, and that's just something I'd like to highlight, that this means the happiness that comes when our conscience is totally free and clear, nothing weighing it down. Because everybody can relate if we've had a situation in our daily life, maybe we had an argument with somebody, we said something that we regret, we did something that we know, oh, I could do better than that, that wasn't right, that was, even if it wasn't breaking the precepts, it's something we acted out of anger, acted out of clinging, acted out of greed. If we try to meditate, we'll be thinking about that, no doubt. And these are the things that they build up little by little, and they weigh down our conscience. The Buddha is saying the benefit of virtue is that if we cultivate it purely, if we aren't acting by body or speech, maybe we still have negative thoughts, we still have thoughts of desire, etc., but if we don't act on them, there's a real happiness, a real stability, a real pleasure that comes from that. And that's the basis for developing in samadhi. So the next section on samadhi starts with sense restraint, then goes into sati sampajanya, mindfulness and alertness. Then it goes into contentedness. So these are 3 different kind of qualities that are kind of the foundation for samadhi. Sense restraint. How is the experience for all of you walking up Vulture's Peak and going to some of these holy places? There's so many sense impingements. It's kind of unbelievable. The amount of people that are trying to get our attention and in all sorts of different ways. If we're in more developed countries, a lot of it's advertising, billboards, media, the online advertising world. But here it's just all sorts of different people trying to get our attention, trying to get something. And we have to restrain our attention, somehow. It's just it's too tiring, it's too taxing. But really the sense restraint is important in those aspects of sense impingement that are connected to our likes and dislikes, to our strong desires. If we start to give our attention to those things, follow in those directions, that leads us into problems and can't meditate if we're following those. So sense restraint doesn't mean that we close down our senses. It doesn't mean we don't see, we don't hear, anything like that. Sometimes when we meditate, of course, we do close our eyes, put in the earplugs. But it means to have wise attention and to know, okay, these are the things I should focus on. This is where I should, put my attention. This is what is unworthy of attention. The next section is about abandoning the hindrances. This is something that's very important to understand. The Buddha talks about this in terms of the development of the higher states of mind, the jhanas. There are 4 jhanas, and there's many different types of insight, there's many different types of psychic powers, but these can only come in a mind that's at least temporarily freed from the 5 hindrances. So the 5 hindrances are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and anxiety, and doubt. And when it talks about them as hindrances, it's like how they're affecting our mind in the present moment, say when we're trying to meditate. Actually, a lot of these things, one needs to be very close to an arhat to totally get rid of them. But in order for our meditation to develop, we need to temporarily abandon them. So that's where the restraint and all these other qualities, mindfulness, come in to help do this. So yeah, these 5 hindrances are something that we need to understand, and we need to be able to let go of to be able to meditate. And on the other side, there's the 7 factors of awakening, which are mindfulness, energy, contemplation of dhammas, piti, rapture, passaddhi, tranquility, samadhi, concentration, tranquility of mind, and equanimity, upekkha. So these are the things we need to cultivate. The Buddha says these are things that are always good, they are always beneficial. Cultivating samadhi, contemplating Dhamma, having energy. And at the same time, the 5 hindrances are things that we always need to try to abandon. We don't want to be following those. We want to be mindful of them, but for the purpose of abandoning them. So you see this in many different places. If we abandon the hindrances, even temporarily, that is the condition that can bring about the jhanas. So these really, really peaceful states of mind that are what the Buddha said is samma samadhi, right concentration. So when we abandon the hindrances, there's a very nice passage in here that I'll read to you, of the Buddha making similes of what it feels like to abandon them, if only temporarily. Suppose that a man, taking a loan, invested in his business affairs. His business affairs succeed. He repays his old debts, and there is extra left over for maintaining his wife. The thought would occur to him, before taking a loan, I invested it because my business affairs. Now my business affairs have succeeded. I have repaid my old debts, and there is extra left over for maintaining my wife. Because of that, he would experience joy and happiness. So it's the joy and happiness that's like a person who's just been freed from debt. Suppose that a man falls sick, in pain and seriously ill. He doesn't enjoy his meals and there is no strength in his body. As time passes, he eventually recovers from that sickness. He enjoys his meals and there is strength in his body. And because of that, he would experience joy and happiness. So it's also like recovering from a severe illness. So the Buddha is kind of saying that when our mind is overcome by desire, by ill will, by restlessness, by anxiety, by doubt, we're not quite right. We're sick. We're in debt. We're in prison. It's a subtle kind of dukkha because it's what we're experiencing inside. We're not necessarily doing any bad karma, but it's the results of what we've done before. These we call asavas, these things that come up within us. We see something that we like, attraction comes up. We see something that we don't like, aversion comes up. But these are kind of sicknesses in our mind. But if we can overcome them through practicing Dhamma, there's a real freedom to be found there. So then the sutta goes on to talk about the jhanas, insight knowledges, the various supernatural powers, and then the three knowledges. So the three knowledges, the three higher knowledges, are what the Buddha also attained on his night of awakening. The knowledge of his own past lives, the knowledge of the passing away and arising of beings in samsara, and then the knowledge of the destruction of the kilesas, the knowledge of the Four Noble Truths. And so in each one of these sections, the Buddha is pointing out these are the potential results from living a renunciant life. So the king was asking about, the renunciant life on a kind of a basic level, but the Buddha is saying there's all these higher and higher levels of distinction, higher levels of liberation that can proceed one after another. And these are the potential benefits of Dhamma practice. As all of you know, this isn't something that is just for monks and nuns. There were many, many, many lay people at the Buddha's time, many lay people throughout history, still many lay people who realized very, very high states of Dhamma. And so it's definitely possible. I encourage all of you, if you haven't read The Great Disciples of the Buddha, not only does it go through all the great monastic disciples, it has a very interesting section on all the great householders, Anathapindika, Lady Visakha, so many of them that were incredibly inspiring. And you see how these people who lived, Anathapindika was a great wealthy businessman, had all kinds of business, but he became a stream enterer. I believe it said that Lady Visakha had 500 children. Maybe that just means a lot. But anyway, she had a massive family, so many relatives, massive house, and she was such a great supporter of the Sangha. I believe she became at least a stream enterer, if not more. But she still had a very worldly life and did all her family duties. So there's all these examples of people that practiced Dhamma, had renunciation, had dana, had sila, had all these qualities, even within their ordinary lives. The ending of the sutta is very interesting, in that the Buddha talks about all these different states, all the way up to liberation, arhatship, that arises when one sees the Four Noble Truths and sees the ending of the kilesas. When the Buddha finishes discussing that, Prince Ajatasattu says, this is a statement you see in the suttas a lot. They repeat it over and over. Many people say the same thing. It was probably just a way that they remembered the experience of what it felt like for people when they heard the Dhamma for the first time and they understood it. So Ajatasattu says to the Buddha, "Magnificent Lord, magnificent, just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to show the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp into the dark so that those with eye could see forms. In the same way has the Blessed One, through many lines of reasoning, made the Dhamma clear. I go to the Blessed One for refuge, I go to the Dhamma, I go to the Sangha of monks. May the Blessed One remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge from this day forward for life." So he expresses his anumodana, his appreciation for the Dhamma. He expresses his desire to be a disciple of the Buddha, to go for refuge. And then he confesses to the Buddha. He says, "A transgression has overcome me, Lord, and that I was so foolish, so muddle-headed, and so unskilled as to kill my father, a righteous man, a righteous king, for the sake of rulership. May the Blessed One please accept this confession of my transgression as such, so that I may restrain myself in the future." And the Buddha says, "Yes, great king, a transgression overcame you, and that you were so foolish, so muddle-headed, and so unskillful as to kill your father, a righteous man, a righteous king. But because you see your transgression as such, and make amends in accordance with the Dhamma, we accept your confession. For it is a cause of growth in the Dhamma and discipline of the noble ones when, seeing a transgression as such, one makes amends in accordance with the Dhamma and exercises restraint in the future." So the Buddha receives this confession from him. This is something that's very, important. The monks actually, we confess offenses to each other every 2 weeks before we do the patimokkha. If we, did something small or big, then we have to tell another monk. But for anybody, any Buddhist, really, if there is something on our minds, on our conscience, to tell somebody, another practitioner of the Dhamma, that we respect, and to tell them what we did and to confess, is something that's very helpful. So this is what the king is showing here. And then at the end, after the king leaves, the Buddha tells the monks, it's really a shame that he killed his father, because if he hadn't have made the bad karma of killing his father, he would have attained stream entry upon hearing the discourse. But unfortunately, his mind was clouded from the bad karma. Yeah, that's a story that happened here in Rajgir, not far from where we are. It's helpful to think while we're on pilgrimage, there's all the stuff that's happening in the present, there's all the people that are around, but there's all these inspiring and amazing things that happened in this very place a long time ago. But yeah, it really seems like the spiritual influence, the barami of the Buddha, Dhamma, the Sangha, of all those noble beings who were here, is still with this place. So it's getting close to 9 o'clock. I was thinking about talking about Mahamoggallana, but we have early morning tomorrow, right? So yeah, I wish everybody the best. I know for myself, I really feel very grateful to be here with all of you, with Ajahn Achalo and all the other monks. Really, it's a very good fortune. One time I asked Ajahn Achalo about faith. Faith in Buddhism is saddha, and faith is one of the 5 spiritual powers. He talked about that in the beginning. Saddha, Viriya, Sati, Samadhi, Panya, right? So it's the first one. And what he said is, it's something like faith is a power, and these powers are something like exercising. It's not just that we have power and strength in our bodies. We have to work out. We have to hit the weights, go running, whatever it might be. And in the same way, all these spiritual powers are things that we have to develop. So when we come to these places and we do puja, make offerings, chanting, meditation, all these things, it's a high-intensity workout. Yeah. And so we're developing our faith power by doing all of this. The last thing I'll just say is the way Ajahn Achalo is leading the retreat. It's challenging for me and maybe others. We're doing a lot of sitting meditation. A lot of times it's more of my style. I like to walk around, see this and that, do more walking meditation or just whatever, explore. But we're doing more sitting meditation. But just remember, this is Patipati Puja, right? Patipati Puja means puja of practice, an offering of practice. So when the Buddha passed away, there was so many devas who were there as he was passing away, offering celestial music, celestial flowers, celestial perfume. And the Buddha says, at this time when the Tathagata is passing away, there's never been a greater offering of all these things in terms of all these devas and beings expressing their respect, devotion through all these different forms of puja. But the Buddha said, greater than all these types of puja is the puja of practicing the Eightfold Path. That's the highest type of puja. So our practice of the Dhamma is an offering to the Buddha, the Dhamma, Sangha, and something of true benefit. So sadhu, anumodana for everybody, and hope you stay healthy and enjoy the rest of the pilgrimage, and see you tomorrow.